Hello, hi everyone. Good morning and welcome back to this class of Christian research or biblical research for within the pastoral context. So we continue our discussion. This will be our lesson 5, fifth week. And we'll try to focus on this topic of Genesis mandate. Okay. We are discussing this first mandate in Eden as the foundation for the research. So the human, as God created us, it's a very very basic human instinct or human nature to seek after information or try to resolve a question or questions. And as we try to live through the reality, man has to do research, meaning that we investigate, examine our surroundings, the reality, and try to answer or respond to the given reality. So basically human life, it involves research. But as we talk about academic research, that's a little bit different than general research. But human nature, it demands the process of research in life itself. So we're trying to find those fundamental reasons or basis for or even the examples of research in the Bible. And as we look at this mandate in Eden, God is asking Adam to name the things. So let's go over back and read. And Adam gave names to all cattle and to the fowl of the air and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found an help meet for him. So first part of this particular verse in Genesis chapter 2, it tells us that God had asked Adam to name all these things. Not only the animals and the insects and birds and fishes, I'm sure that he named all the objects like a stone or rock, tree, flower. I mean, those are the things that he see, and he tried to obviously try to name those things. And the naming is the implication of the naming is you need to identify each object. See, horse is different from cow. So what you're doing is identifying a certain object by comparing them and by their looks. Basically first by their looks you may notice the differences. So this is a very very first step of any research, observation, seeing the things. And as you see, not only you identify the differences, then you may have some questions. But here basically naming is using your intellectual ability, the cognitive, let me write that down. Cognitive means the intellect or the function of knowledge and so on. So we use that cognitive ability, the brain, to function, see and observe and make a differences. And try, I mean, as you see these animals, let's talk about animals. I mean, there are hundreds, thousands, and thousands different kinds of animal. And that's complex. So you try to understand the complexity and try to organize and systemize all these functions, looking at it, identifying it, making the difference, labeling it with the names, and try to remember what you have named. We are not certain if Adam had a way of recording the things, but as far as Adam is concerned, before the fall, before that that alienation from God, his brain was functioning 100% for sure. And even today, if our brain works like 100%, we'll be super smart. We are only using around 10%. The smartest person will use 10% of actual brain capacity. So knowing that, Adam may have used 100% of his capacity, the intellectual ability, the brain function, and he would have remembered all these things and would have been able to organize them. Just like today's computer is, that it has a certain memory capacity and it has a hard drive to store all this data and knowledge. It would have been much better than today's computer, and Adam would have remembered in a very organized way. So that's kind of research that he was required to do as a first assignment at Dan. So it has a much implication for anyone who is, living the reality, everyday, ordinarily routine life on earth. But especially for the students like us, or scholars like yourself, who's doing very academic research and the pastoral research, there is, as we find the very base from the example of Eden. And it also demands creativity, distinctiveness, understanding the distinctiveness, and classifying and organizing. So these are the functions that is also exactly required as you do a academic or pastoral research. So your research would demand creativity. You have to be creative, especially when you're doing like a PhD, doctoral degree. It demands very new and creative theory or the contribution to the particular field that you're studying on. And of ability to distinguish from A to B or B to C or A to A dash. That's the ability that is given. Not all human beings, are capable of having the same ability to distinguish. So if you have a special ability to be able to distinguish the little small details, then you are good candidate for a good researcher. So be happy. Classify and organize. Every academic study, it demands the ability to organize and to be able to classify, to label them in in a different way and sort them in a certain way, so you can look for it later on and make a reference to. And this ability to organize is also, it is a gift. It's not given to everyone. So if you have that ability to be able to organize the things, and then you might apply that skill to the academic field. And pastor, I mean, a Christian leader, you need to be able to organize. Okay. Then that exercise that God has given to Adam to name the things and objects and animals, the wording. Word is very important component in academic research, especially in pastoral research. Pastors, whether, I mean, you like it or not, you are gifted or not, you are to study the words of God. So the ability to understand the vocabulary and to play with the words and the sentences, that is quite an important part of a research. So Adam, as he tried to name the animals, he has to invent the words, the vocabularies, different sounds, and then the meaning associated with it. So the wording is also a key component in doing a research, or especially when you're writing a thesis or dissertation for the higher degree, like a master's and a doctoral degree, then wording is very important. See, the concept and conceptualize and semantics and how to arrange these words so it could be easily read and logical, that would be also key to a research. So we find that wording, ability to use word is key to the function of Adam as he tried to name these things. Record to remember. I just told you about this. So he would have had the ability to remember these things in his brain. And even though the Bible does not say, it is possible that Adam would have had a certain way of recording, because the state of Eden, the Garden of Eden, that was when we are perfect. Just, the only thing is that we did not know the good and evil, and that's the only thing that's missing in the context of Eden. And I'm sure that personally, I'm sure that the Adam and Eve had some way of recording the data. And then macro and micro. That's gonna be one paradigm that you need to remember as you become a researcher yourself, whether it's a pastoral research or whether it's an academic research or whether it's some other kind of research, whether it's a science, natural science, or liberal arts. There's a macro and micro, and we need both. Macro means overall, general, the whole forest, while the micro means each plant or glass of flowers that are in the forest, or the little insects. You're looking at each and every insects and animals in there. That's micro. So the research, it demands us to have the micro and macro perspective, both of them. So you need to do macro research and micro research, both of them, as we, just try to tackle and a certain question or problem or a subject. Then comes the fall. I rather choose the word alienation than fall, but many use the word the fall. Meaning we fell from where we are supposed to be and then become sinners, so the fall. But there's a more of alienation from God, being apart. So let's read Genesis 3:23. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. I think it's King James Version. The reason I chose the very old version, it does have stick to the original language better than some other translations. Anyway, so the fall and the post Eden. So there was Eden, and you were kicked out of Adam and Eve were kicked out of Eden, and that's post Eden. So after Eden. There's a drastic change. When a change, especially those drastic change happens, it takes a science, it takes a research to deal with that change of reality. For example, for today, one good, the great challenge, the change that we face is the global warming. Of course, human has caused we have caused this global warming. But we didn't know it's happening until, there, some people, the scientists, begin to notice these changes. And now, the North Pole, the ice there is melting. Same thing happening in Atlantic, Arctic South, right? So there's a global warming, and that's kind of drastic change. Same thing here, or even worse. That they were enjoying this environment in Eden, and now they are kicked out of Eden. It may refer to a place, or it may refer to the ecology itself. So even though they were in the same place, it might be changed, different climate. But the Bible records there's Eden, and they were kicked out of that particular region and area and went into the less favorable condition or ecology or environment. So when you face these things, then you need to do the research. So what they did after the fall, and they found out they are naked. It has two senses. One's a moral awareness of their spiritual awareness of them being naked, meaning they are without God. They are separated from God. That's one sense. And then physically they are naked. Well, why is it issue? Other than the shame caused by their own sin and finding out that they are in this shameful, kind of not so favorable looking condition. But the weather also probably is changing. It's colder, hotter. So they did the research was to look for the material so they can cover themselves, and they find the fig tree, and then then they make a apron, says the Bible, or the cover for themselves. And then there's a, not only the change brings the confusion. You're confused. Your mind is not in the same stable condition, and then that means problems and issues, and also challenges. Most of the challenges that human being face as we try to live against or interact with the reality, that is gonna be something that continues throughout human life. And for the pastoral research, if you narrow it down to the pastoral context, as you try to pastor or lead your small groups or your students, you're facing these challenges. And then those challenges and confusion and problems, these things all demand a systematic approach trying to resolve, and you learn from the errors. So you make mistakes and you learn and you make corrections next time a little bit better and improve. Then you improve a little further as you continue to practice. So that's how the research is happening. No research is perfect. No research actually is conclusive most of the time. Because as you conclude one issue or one problem, then it brings probably many more issues and problems to be resolved. So the research is like a never-ending process. Because our human life is never perfect, and it will never be completed and reach perfection as we live. Even as a Christian, we know the Christians do fail. We do make mistakes. We make dumb mistakes over and over again. Sometimes without intention, sometimes with intention. So that's still the Christian life, which is not much different from non-Christian life in that matter. But only the different thing is we try to resolve those problems within or with God's help, while someone else is trying to resolve those issues in their own way. So the Bible does not say that all the problems and issues and challenges are going to be gone as you become a believer. No, it's still there. The same challenges, same issues, and it's actually it adds more serious problems and issues once you become a Christian, because you have to think of the biblical and Christian and godly ways, plus just general issues and problems. So it is more difficult, and it's more of challenge, which justifies the needs for the research. So that's the reason that we need to think about it and rethink and test, examine, and find resolutions, and then try to repeat the same for others, and try to prove that what you're doing is right in the eyes of God. See, that's the kind of challenge for the pastoral research. So reality brings to the existence. existence for us human beings on earth just after the Eden. So they were kicked out of Eden. And what happens is God curses the land. And God curses the serpent, the snake, who is a Satan. I mean, God curses Satan and the earth. But he did not curse Adam and Eve, because God would not do that. He is able to do that, but God does not curse them, but put them in very kind of rather difficult existence. So the earth is cursed and it does not produce. When it does not produce, you have to work on it. In the Garden of Eden, it was a perfect condition for the plants to bear fruits, and you don't have to work. It's automatic. It's natural. And the rain comes. I mean, there is no rain actually at the Garden of Eden. The water comes from the bottom, the earth, and it wets the plants as much as they need. Some plants need more, some plants need less. And it was automatic. The weather control, perfect, automatic system, because God was in control. And then they enjoyed the luxury of not working and then being provided. And they exercised and they were healthy and happy until that there was that temptation, and then the choice was given between good and evil. And then we know the story. They choose to be evil, and survival becomes an issue, and that demands a research, because you have to be effective and efficient. And how do we do that? By doing research and study. So survival, and then conflict. Not only it's between the issues with the earth and then production of food, but there's a conflict with everything. Not only between man and woman. They try to finger each other, say, because of you, and they, create this conflict. And then we see the conflict between Adam, the Cain and Abel. They fight, and Cain kills Abel for him being good to God. So the conflict. And then earth and human being. And then man and animals. Some animals become very, very aggressive and attack human being. So the conflict. And it does take mind of science to try to resolve that conflict. And you can react or proact. And the science, the research, is way of proact. Proact is reacting is you just respond spontaneously. Your emotion kicks in, and it's spontaneous. But proaction, it takes your brain, your cold mind to process and then try to resolve and then take over the issue rather than run by the problem. So that's proactive, being proactive. And the resolution. And we are trying to come up with a resolution so we can sustain this earthly existence, even though it is harsh, and when you are with God and when you're walking with God, this harsh context or harsh reality, very difficult reality, is no longer an issue. I mean, it is still an issue, but it becomes less of an issue because we know that we can overcome and eventually this thing is going to end. Same thing with the coronavirus. It's a real challenge and it's a matter for survival for some people. And it creates conflicts of interest, conflicts of using the resources and so on. And we may react or proact. And proact is making the medicine to be able to cure the coronavirus contamination, or you invent a vaccine to prevent you from getting sick. So that's proaction, and that's a resolution. So existence, it means trying to resolve the issues and problems that are given. Now, this is in Genesis chapter 6 and the story of Noah. Even the non-believers do know the story of Noah and the ark. Ark is a big ship. And make you an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shall you make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. Pitch is this dark stuff, the oil. Comes from the oil. When you dry oil, there's that black sticky stuff that's left, and it was probably available. So God says, make an ark, the big ship, and then rooms, and so on. So the reason I quote this is this. Noah's narrative. The story of Noah, as we study this, the story of Noah, there's a lot of research and the study, the intellectual activity that's been involved in the building and then carrying out the mission of building an ark. So the flood is a big change, and they never experienced any rain until Noah experienced the flood. That was the first rain. They had the mist and then the fog, but never rain. And they did not know what God was talking about or what Noah was talking about when he was going around telling people it's gonna rain. What is rain? They said. It's just like a climate change that we face. What is climate change? I mean, what you're talking about? Many does not still believe that the climate change is real. They think it's made up conspiracy. This conspiracy theory. I mean, sometimes it's true that there is certain conspiracy about things that's going on Earth and around us today, but they thought this flood is conspiracy. I mean, it's a lie. So, they did not believe. Okay, let's take a short break, and I'm going to come back. Thank you. Okay, so we are back. Second part of week number 5. Week number 5 on the pastoral research. Okay, we are talking about this Noah's narrative, and its reference or implication to the topic of research. So the flood is a big change that is going to come. So how God does tell Noah, and God tells Noah, saying, "You're gonna build an ark. It's a humongous big ship. It's twice of the size of football field, and it's like today's there's oil tanker, the big ship that carries oil, crude oil from a place to B, right? It's a big ship. So the ark, and then it takes a lot of science, and science means new knowledge. See, he has never built an ark. Thus, God gives him a design, a very specific design of how it is going to be built, the shape, size, the structure, and then materials even, and so on. So it's technology and the engineering and so on. So I'm convinced, it's logical to assume that Noah had a good technology and the tools to build this large, humongous ship. It says that he did it by himself. So we don't have no idea actually how the technology and engineering skills were at the time of Noah. And my belief is that they had a very high technology, and the machines and tools and so on. So he was able to build that by himself, and it is safe for us to assume that these building of an ark did require a lot of research. Even though God gave Noah the direction and then the blueprint and everything, it's still Noah has to do work, and he did the research, because there's going to be a dramatic change of climate and weather, which is called the flood. And it would involve biology, because he has to pick 2, sometimes more animals to bring it in and reserve them, the species for the later on. So there's a lot of study of biology involved, and study of climate, of course, and then weather, because it has to do with the rain, and him opening the window later on when the rain is finished, and he has to figure out when to land and where to land and so on. So he sends birds out to bring the olive branch and so on. As you read the story of Noah, even if you're not Christian, please, of the knowledge, try to read the story of Noah, and it's gonna teach you something very new. And there's so-called catastrophe, which is a very dramatic, tragic incident, earthly. And then the story tells how Noah was able to manage himself doing the research and following the result of research and actually making science into a actual practice and building a ship which he never probably have used before or seen. And so that's the story of science, the research, and how research would benefit and help them to survive. So at the end, it has to do with the survival at the basic level, and then the research helps you to survive better, or even sometimes find the best way to react or interact with the reality. So again, the research as I define is your response or reaction or interaction or proaction toward or against the reality. So that's the how we define the research. And in that sense, any human condition, whether you're a pastor or a teacher or just a member of church, a disciple or student, or a child in a Christian home, it does require us to do the research because by doing research, not only you benefit, you are going to be benefiting from the research, but also you're going to benefit others, which is more important and which should be more primary. So any research for a Christian or pastor, a Bible teacher, or parents, Christian parents, our research is, again, I emphasize, it is done for the benefit of others, or better of the world. So we are doing it to improve the conditions, the living conditions, or for the well-being of others, then which will eventually also benefit myself, because I am the part of this whole community, whole earth, the whole world that we live in. So some people do research for himself or herself, or to gain knowledge and just to be satisfied by gaining the knowledge and having the answer to the personal, individual, and interest and questions. That did help to improve us, our reality, the living, the existence. But it is much better to do it for others, because that's how God is, and that's how God asked us to. So, as going back to Noah's narrative, he did it because he was going to save the world by doing it. But eventually, there are only 8 people, only his family, who would have listened to the warnings of Noah, and they were brought into the ship, and they were saved. So that's the kind of story still repeating. People does not believe. People does not listen when we tell them that there's going to be that final destruction, final judgment that is going to come, and they have never seen one. Actually, they've seen Sodom and Gomorrah the story of Noah, this has been there. And then the war and the pandemic, these are all the signs of the final destruction. This is like a preview of the final destruction. And then if you have the logical mind, it is easy to figure out that these previews going to be expanded, and then it's going to be more intensive in the final day. But people does not listen and they don't believe, just like they did in the time of Noah. And when we Christians, when I proclaim that Jesus Christ is the only way to the salvation, to come to the Father, and he said, I'm the truth, I'm the way, I'm the life. And then he meant it. And either he lies or he is saying the truth. Either he is crazy or he is telling the truth. Or he is making up this story or he is telling the truth. And you have to make a decision. So how do we make that decision? By researching what? You have to research the Bible. If you're not a Christian, please do read the Bible. And then, you have to find out. If you're a Muslim, that's fine. I mean, you already know the Old Testament. But as much as you believe in the Muhammad, the Prophet, you may also want to read the Prophet Jesus. And that's in the New Testament, which most Muslims disregard to read. So that's going to be the challenge. And that requires the mind of researcher to see all the researchers. The thing is, you have to start at zero base. You don't assume actually that to be true or not, and you just say possible. It is possible. That's called hypothesis. And every science, good research start with hypothesis. You assume, and then that means there's no definite answer yet. So you go in and they take time and effort to examine the evidences, examine the data, examine the resources, and gather them, and make an evaluation of those resources and data, and just make your sound, logical, rational judgment on the data, subjective judgment on the data, information that you have. Then you come up with a conclusion. That's the research. So that's how we tackle the reality, the life, and then bring the proper existence. So same thing with the religion, the belief. So climate and weather, all these elements are the subject of study and research. And Noah, I'm sure that he had to have the skills and ability to tackle these subjects and come up with a very rational and then objective answer to the given question. And then also Noah had to deal with these numbers, because without the measuring and measurements and the calculating and so on, you are not going to be able to build this large, humongous ship. You have to have a design, and then it involves the numbers. So I assume before the flood, when everything was destroyed, Noah must have had a very good mathematic skills, the knowledge, okay, and also the documentation. He should have had the way of drawing. Not only use his brain, then he has to have something to read and then write on. So even though the Bible does not say it, we can safely assume that there has to be some way of documentation. And then not only the calculation, documentation, then the experiment. We see that he is sending out the birds several times, and then that's an example of a good researcher who's doing the experiment. And then there is something called educated guess. That is a very key process in doing a research. It's a key element. When you're trying to build a theory or hypothesis, that does require an educated guess. And what do we do with the educated guess? You try to prove that guess, the possibility with experiment, and then collecting data and so on. So that's what the research is. You're trying to prove your educated guess. And then sometimes the educated guess comes out as a result of your previous study, previous research. So your previous research may not be complete or perfect yet, but from what you have, then you're going to develop a certain theory that would work in a given situation and context. If that happens over and over and again, that becomes a real theory, meaning it's a principle. So theory becomes a principle by examining and testing. So when Newton, the English scientist, he saw an apple coming down to earth when it is ripe, he thought, oh, that he did not think that apple is good to eat. Okay, that's just general population. Most of us would do that. But he thought that they asked the question, why would an apple drop to earth instead of flying to sky? See? And then he guessed, and his educated guess says, everything that has weight, it falls to the earth. And is there some force that is drawing that weight is subject to the ground? So he assumes there has to be some power or the force of attraction, and then he eventually names it gravity. So that's how he processed his educated guess. Same thing with the Noah. Noah guessed. This is educated guess. The bird brings a branch of fresh olive. He guessed, okay, there's land that is already dry and already been dry for at least certain period of time, month or two, so you can bring the olive new fresh branch. So that's kind of educated guess. That's how research is done. So we can find many more examples from the Bible that supports the need for the research, and then means and method for the research. So if you are interested, you can go further and study more on this. Now we'll go on to the next lesson. So lesson 3, we have, studied about the biblical foundation and example about the research, pastoral academic research. So we conclude God has given us the ability and then mandate to do research and study, use our intellectual ability to process so we can face the reality. And that's how God would do, that's how God is, and He has given the same ability and nature in us. So it is natural for us to investigate, to ask questions, and to come up with the resolutions or answers. So that's what the research is basically. The reality brings the problem and issues and questions, and you need to deal with it by using your ability, the intellectual or cognitive ability. And we'll further study about this cognitive ability and the mandate that we are given. So the humanity and science. Human curiosity. Other than having the issues and problems, even without the problems, we have something called curiosity. It's a built-in instinct, human nature. Excuse me. Tree of good and evil. One of the reasons, the reason that Eve, Adam's wife, took the fruit of good and evil is her curiosity. She wanted to know. She was dying to know what would have happened if she took that fruit and eat them. It looked good and looked tasteful. It was not only beautiful to look at it, and it looked really taste good. So that curiosity took her to make that decision. And human is empirical by nature. Empirical means we want to experience. Someone may tell you something. For example, they can tell you about the Niagara Falls. I haven't been there yet myself. And you look at this photograph. That is still not enough. And you look at this beautiful video, drone shot over the Niagara Falls. And it's wonderful, magnificent, beautiful. And then the most common and natural response to it is, I want to go see it myself. I want to go see it myself. You may have traveled across the Pacific. Many of us who were born in Korea, China, Japan, or elsewhere, as you came first time to United States of America, there's something that you have seen in the picture and may actually you have visited. For example, Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Niagara Falls, or City of New York, and then the Statue of Liberty. These things, when you look at it with your own eyes, it's very different feeling. So empirical, you want to experience it. You want to see it yourself. You want to touch it. You want to feel it. So that's human curiosity. You want to experience it. You tell a child not to touch that hot stove. But as you know, many of us do have to experience how hot that stove is in the winter by touching it. So that's how badly curiosity is for a human being, even especially a child. They always ask why. When a child begins to ask question why rather than what, at the beginning they will say, what is this, what is that, and then you tell them the names, and that's how they learn the language and how they learn the names of the subject. And then the next stage would be asking why, which means they already have developed this cognitive ability. They are being intellectual. Not only they are being intellectual, they are being curious about things. When this happens, they are ready to learn, really learn the things. And you have to feed them with the right answers. Parents usually don't have answers, so some parents say, I don't know, or don't ask. You silence them. That's a bad way. And you're not going to develop a good researcher or a scholar or scholastic mind in a child. When they ask why, you're going to ask another question. Try to bring the answers, not give answers. Usually parents don't have answers. And then it's good way. If you don't have answers, just help them to try to find the answers themselves. So empirical, you want to experience. Imagination. Imagination is another area of researcher's mind. Curiosity, another aspect of curiosity. People have ways to feel meaning to feel the emptiness, fulfill that curiosity. One way of fulfilling that curiosity is imagination. You dream, you daydream. So these are the dreaming, imagination, making things up in your mind. That's also an aspect of curiosity. And it takes a lot of imagination, good imagination, for a researcher to be a good researcher. And see the movies and the drama and stories that we read and see, watch and enjoy. It's not limited to the imagination is not limited to the entertainment industry, but it is basically for the science. Without an imagination, going to the moon and coming back and walking on the moon, I mean, that's really very impossible imagination. Because it was impossible, they thought it was only an imagination. Who could have imagined that you would have this kind of device on your hand to look for the information? The whole Bible is here. And this small thingy. And not only the whole Bible, I have like 100 different versions in English, and then also many different versions in other languages. And here. It used to be the whole library for those information, and now you have this in your hand. Who could have imagined this? So the imagination, you pursue it and you try to make that imagination a reality. So actually, not only we are interacting in response to the given reality, people create the new reality to overcome the reality that's given. So that's part of science, that's technology, that's engineering. And that started from that curiosity. So curiosity is a core element, very fundamental element in coming to the research. And also creativity. Creativity is very key to human existence. You have to be creative to go against the reality, because the reality is never the same. The reality, the moment as I speak, few seconds later, is new reality. There's so many changes that are happening in the world outside this classroom. So the reality I knew about an hour ago is no longer valid. Meaning that you have the new reality every second. But more, to be general, a day after today, then we are going to face new reality. When there's these continuing changes, it demands continuing creativity. So you need to be very creative to tackle the reality that is constantly changing day after day. So good researcher is a creative researcher. He or she has to invent or come up with a new, not only new, that means not only just improved, but totally new, creative, which means there hasn't been any of these. So the smartphone is probably the most creative invention of this the last century. And we don't know what's going to be more. I mean, there's going to be something that's more creative than this. People become very creative. So there's foldable smartphone. Now there is a rollable smartphone, and so on. And one day, you may have the little chip in your brain or somewhere in your body that works as just as much as smartphone. I mean, those are those creative ideas that drives human generation, and so human curiosity is the most driving force for a researcher. Okay? I think time's up for this week, and thank you for listening and coming to the class again, and we'll continue on the discussion of how human nature has to do with research and science next week. Thank you again, and